everybody. My name is Christina Zan. My pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the assistant directors at the Writing Center. I am a second year PhD in literature and a professor of the FYE 101-102 sequence here. And today I'm going to be doing a small MLA workshop just to sort of go over some foundations of MLA. It's not an exhaustive resource of everything MLA is and every single citation, but more of giving you some foundational tips and tricks so that you can build your own toolkit and arsenal and be able to tackle MLA in the future. So MLA, just like all citation styles, is everywhere. There are a variety of different citation styles. You've probably also heard of APA and Chicago style. MLA, APA, and Chicago are the most common, but there are other little ones like CSA, CSE, ASA, and often various publishing houses will kind of have like their own house version of like MLA or Chicago. But when it comes to the humanities, we like to use MLA, and any kind of work you do typically in literature and languages is going to continue using MLA. And we're in our 8th version of MLA now, and I believe they're actually working on the 9th. And even though there are all these different citation styles, the thing in common is that they all serve a way to credit the voices that you are building your own stories and research upon. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Ideas are everywhere, and everything in life has been building to this point. And just like how you wouldn't dine and dash at a restaurant, don't dine and dash with your papers. You want to make sure you're giving proper credit to who inspired you and who has done the work before you, and in hopes that they would do the same thing for you. So for this presentation, I'm going to be breaking MLA into kind of 3 categories. I'll be looking at end of text citations, which is what goes in the actual works cited page. Then I'll do a brief look at in-text citations, which are pretty easy once you have end of text down. And then we're actually going to format a document in MLA together. So in-text and end-of-text citations, they work hand in hand. Your end-of-text or your works cited page is like your detailed, comprehensive, cohesive list of everything you've utilized in your paper, all sources. Your audience knows when they go to this final page, they can find everyone that you have used, and then they can find those sources themselves. So it's not just giving someone's name or a title of an article, but letting your audience know, if I want to find this source, I know exactly how to get to it. And then the in-text citations kind of function like a key, where you're kind of connecting a specific quote or paraphrase or summary to the specific author or source in your page so that those things can link. Even though works cited entries change, obviously, like each entry is a little different, there are always some similarities that are foundational and will help you as you grow your knowledge in MLA. When it comes to formatting, they're always alphabetical. There's always like the same spacing as the rest of your document, and they always have a hanging indent. It's nice to have things that you know will right now always be the same. I won't go into detail on those now because I will be actually showing you how to do these in the formatting section. And then again, while there are a plethora of items to be cited and each item has a slightly unique citation, there are a few repeating items that you can always keep in mind. You're always going to want to be thinking about who wrote this, who created this, what is it called, when was it written or created, who published it and where was it published. And I'm just going to go ahead and say now that a big part of this workshop, in my opinion, is debunking beliefs that MLA has to be something that you memorize all of it. That feels insurmountable, and probably because it is. I have been using MLA in high school term papers, in 4 years of college, in 2 years of a master's degree, and now 2 years of my PhD, and it will not stop anytime soon. And while I know a lot of things off the top of my head, almost every single time I cite something, I look at my favorite resources, like my MLA handbook or the Owl at Purdue website, because a lot of those nitty gritty things with spacing and commas and periods and punctuations, they're hard to remember, and that's okay. MLA, just like language itself, is living, breathing, and changing as we grow as human beings and scholars, and so you should never feel pressure to memorize everything. Instead, think of it as experiments where you are getting more knowledge, you're building more knowledge every time you experiment with MLA and every time you cite in MLA. And I hope that when we look at some of these foundational works cited entries, you're able to see some patterns emerge that you can take with you as you make your own works cited pages and entries. So again, like I said, we're not doing an exhaustive list of every single citation you could ever do. That would be like a whole class, not even like a workshop. You could probably spend maybe a whole semester course on the ins and outs of MLA. But that is why we have resources that are always accessible to us so that we don't have to spend a semester in a course on MLA and then remember it forever, fortunately. But I wanted to pick out what I thought were some of the most common works cited entries that you'll probably be using as FYE students. Or if you're not an FYE student watching this, then these are still really foundational ones where you'll notice a lot of patterns and connections being made. And so I think that there still are integral in kind of building that toolkit without knowing everything. So I'm going to go over books, works in an anthology, websites, journal articles found on online databases, and then quickly go over a handful of visual sources. So we'll start nice and easy, citation of a book. I love starting here because I feel like it is the foundation for all the other print and then electronic sources, and it's only got like 4 items, so it's super nice and easy. A good place to start. So what I've sort of done for the formatting here, so that you know as you are following along in the presentation, I will have talking is difficult. I will have the format of a citation without the information plugged in, so you can see the base of how it always looks. So you can see here I have author, title of book, publisher, publication date, and then directly after it I will give an example of what that would look like plugged in, so that you can see it both how your own books may be plugged in and then an actual specific example that I've chosen. Some of these examples are real pieces of work, and some I have just made up. And I'll let you know which is which, so you're not searching for something that may not exist. So again, some of our foundational questions are here with a book, right? Who wrote this? What's it called? Who put it into the world? And when did it enter the world? And so we have author, title, publisher, publication date. Super easy. A couple formatting things you'll notice right off the bat that you should keep in mind for any citation is the author, you'll notice, is last name, comma, first name. For pretty much every citation, you're going to start last name, comma, first name. The only time you wouldn't start a citation with the author's last name first is if you were referring to like a performer where their stage name was 2 names. Like, for example, you wouldn't say Gaga, comma, lady, you would say Lady Gaga. But unless you're citing a performer that has a name that wouldn't be put out of order, it is always going to be last name, comma, first name when it is the first entry in the list the first name or the only name. If there are any other names, it's a little different, which we will be looking at in a second. The name of the book is in italics, and that's a rule of thumb you've probably heard before that's not designated to MLA or to Works Cited. It's a rule of thumb that short items like short stories, poems, podcast episodes, journal articles, these things are in quotes, but the big things or the things that many things are contained in, like books, movies, the journals themselves, the whole name of the podcast itself, these things are in italics. And then you'll also notice that there's some variation between periods and commas. Like, for example, between the name and the title and the publisher, we've got periods, but between the publisher and the date, we have a comma. If you want to memorize these things, that is totally up to you, but you don't have to because you can look this up anytime. But that's something that is why you need to focus when you do MLA, you know? Like, you don't have to memorize everything, but you should pay attention because it's easy to miss a comma versus a period. And I'm going to go ahead here and talk about more than one author because this rule for more than one author is going to be the same no matter what you're citing, whether it's a book, a podcast, a, anthology, a journal. This is the same rule for authors. And it's also the rule for authors when you're citing in text as well. So go ahead and get something nice and foundational that you can hold on to throughout the PowerPoint and beyond right here at the beginning. So this is just something I made up. This is not a real book and not real authors. But let's say that Jane Miller and David Jones wrote a book together. We would put Miller Jane, last name, comma, first name, like we did when there was only one author. But then for every other author, you write that first name, last name, no commas like you normally would. So whether it was just Jane Miller and David Jones, or if it's Jane Miller, David Jones, and John Smith, both of those names will be first name, last name after the very first one. But the first one will always be last name, comma, first name. And yes, with the first one, even if there's two names, you still need to put a comma between the first author's first name and the and. If there are more than 3 authors, MLA basically says that is too much space. We don't need to see all of that. It is going to take up way too much space on the page and be cluttered. So instead, we have this fancy little Latin phrase, et al., which essentially means and others. Jane Miller wrote this with others. Jane Miller and others. And so anytime you have over 3 authors, last name, comma, first name, comma, et space al, period. Now, one more additional thing that you may have seen here that I wanted to add when it comes to books, because I do feel like it's important, is here you may see that I have put a city when I did not do that on the Cormac McCarthy novel. And that's because although MLA in the 7th edition required cities in every book citation or print citation, in MLA 8, you are not required to put the city. However, if your book has a publisher that is unknown in North America, that has many international offices, so it's more offices than just America, or your book was printed before the year 1900. And I don't mean it was written before 1900, because often books written before 1900 will have reprintings in the past century, but specifically you have a book that has been printed, like in this case, in 1874, you do need to put the city, and that's because in these cases, the publisher may be unknown, out of business, out of commission, we may not know them, or they have multiple offices and editions may look different in their international offices and printings. So that may have felt like a lot of time on one slide, but I promise there's a lot of foundational stuff here that is going to help us as we go forward. So let's talk about one more print source, which are anthologies, specifically citing a work within an anthology. I picked this one because I find anthologies to be very common in the writing process, and especially for your FYE students, whether you have those students or you are a student, the foundational texts that you are required to have in those two classes in that sequence, the Carolina Reader and the Carolina Rhetoric, are both anthologies. An anthology is basically just another word for a collection. It is a collection of small works within a larger house, essentially. That your book is housing many smaller works and that have editors that put those works together. Multiple authors exist in this collection, in this anthology. So anytime you are citing a short story or a poem from the Carolina Reader or an article from the Carolina Rhetoric, you will be citing it as a work in an anthology. This is very similar to a book. The ways that it's different is because you have to give credit both to the person who wrote the small work that you're citing and to the entire collection and the people who spent the time curating that collection. And you additionally need to let the audience know where exactly in that book, since there are multiple locations in that book, you found this item. But we're working with these same questions of who wrote this, what's it called, where can we find it, when was it written, who put it together, and so you can see these patterns emerging. So once again, we have the author name, we have the title of the work, and again, this is the name, author name, and title name of the specific story or article or poem, what have you, within the collection. And then you're going to have the title of the full collection or book or anthology, the editors themselves, so you can give credit to those who selected them, the year, the publisher of the year, just like we just did, and this time again, like I said, the page range of entry. So I've chosen, this is an actual citation from the most recent edition of the Carolina Reader, Gilman, Charlotte Perkins, which is also a good example because if an author has a middle name, you always put it with their first name. So it's last name, first name, space, middle name. The only way the middle name would go with the last name would be if it's not actually like a middle name, but it's a hyphenated or compound last name. So if her name was Charlotte Perkins Gilman, then you would put Perkins Gilman, Charlotte. But this is not a last name, it is a middle name or maiden name, so it will go with the first name. And again, like I said, following the same rule of thumb you've probably already followed in your work so far. Short work is in quotes, a short story in this case, and then the entire collection, the larger work, is in italics. Comma, edited by our two lovely editors. And again, like I said, when you're not listing the author at the beginning of the citation, it's always first name, last name. Even if it's a first versus second editor, it's still, since it's not at the beginning of the citation, first name, last name. Or first name, middle name, last name. Just the regular order that you would write someone's name. Publisher, publisher year, and the page range. And for MLA, you always put 2 P's to denote multiple pages and 1 P to denote one specific page. And now I'm going to move us from these print sources to virtual sources. So again, there are a ton of electronic sources, especially because these days you can find anything online. But I wanted to go over what I thought was one of the most foundational ones, which is just a page on a website, and then one of the most common ones that you will be utilizing as a scholar, which are articles from online databases. But the cool thing about online sources is that, again, like I've said, MLA builds on itself. Just if you have a source that you would cite one way in print, typically you don't cite that a totally different way online. You just add the new kind of containers And by container, MLA kind of uses the word container to literally mean a place in which this item is contained. So like it's contained within a website, it's contained within a database, what have you. And so even though MLA has many different citations, the cool thing is that they do often build off each other. Like you would take the information from a print source and kind of merge it with the website citations. And so that's why, like, even though you may, if like you find like an art piece online, you may be like, oh, I don't know how to cite that. But if you know how to cite like a book, you know that you're going to need like author information and title information and date. And you know how to cite a website, you know that you need like, you know, where the site that it's found, the container and URLs. Then you can probably deduce pretty well what information you might need. And of course, like I said, you can check your resources anytime. So again, I picked a very foundational one here, just a page on a website. And again, you can probably see some of this repetition. We have author name, who made this, who wrote this, title of page or article, name of the website itself, quite like the publisher of a print source, you know, who put this up, publication date or the date it was written, and a URL. Couple things before we move forward. I say title of page or article. Here I just say page, but I'm saying article with my voice because you could either be on a website where you're, say, not looking at an article someone wrote. For example, you could be on a page that's a government website or an organization or a blog, and you may be on like their About Us section of the page. And that would count as the title of the one page you're on the website. Or you may be looking at an actual article that has its own title. And then I will say something about URLs. URL is your foundation. Again, MLA 7 did not require URLs, but now in MLA 8 we do. There are two things to look for before you use a URL though, and they are permalinks and DOIs. And essentially, permalinks and DOIs are more stable ways to reach a source. The internet is always changing, things are always being taken down and being edited and being put back up. So the more stable a link or a connection to that online source, the better. You'll typically find DOIs with academic sources. You probably won't find a DOI for like a blog or a news site. But if you're on a scholarly website, then make sure to look for a DOI. There may not be one, and if that's the case, the URL is totally fine. But always look for that DOI first. And when it comes to permalinks, I won't get into detail about what those are because I'm not super tech savvy, but essentially it is a more stable link, a permanent link, permalink. And often sites at the beginning will have, if it's like a popular site, will have like a share button. And if you click that share button and it says copy link, that will actually be a permalink instead of a URL. This isn't like the most important thing, but it is absolutely preferred to use the permalink because you will guarantee that that person will find your exact article, whereas URLs could eventually not work. So here I have a real article that I found yesterday when I was making this, and it made me smile because I want to make my bestie smile. So just like our books, right, our print sources, everything we've been looking at so far, we have a last name, comma, first name. We have a title in quotation marks. We have the container where it's found, and in this time it's in italics. Typically names of websites are in italics. I pulled this one from CNN, and it's published on February 2nd, which I put in the MLA format of 2 Feb 2021. And then afterwards, I have just ended with my URL. This one did not have a permalink, so I just took the URL directly from the top of my browser. And again, you'll notice little things, like I said before, how sometimes there are periods and sometimes there are commas. And again, I recommend that you don't try to memorize all of these and drive yourself crazy, and you use your resources. And now I'm going to look at an article from a database. This is specifically not just an article from a website, but from an online database like JSTOR or Academic Search Complete or Project Muse. If you're in English 101, and especially if you're in English 102, you'll probably have been told by this point to find a scholarly source or an academic source, and you've probably been taught by the library or by your professor how to navigate the library's databases that we offer here at USC. And again, you'll kind of see some, I love this one too, because you're seeing some repetition here. You're seeing some stuff we saw all the way back in books. You're seeing some stuff we saw in like the anthology. You're seeing some stuff we just saw on the website. So let's take a closer look. We've got the author name, like usual, title of the article in quotes, like usual, title of the journal in italics, because just like an anthology, you've got the whole journal itself and then the little articles within it. And for journals, when you want to let the audience know the editions, like what specific edition of the journal this is, you do that with volume and issue numbers. If the journal has a volume and an issue number, always use both. If it has one but not the other, that is okay. You can just skip one. You don't have to put anything in its place. You can put just volume or just number. And if it has neither, that's also okay. You can just skip it and go straight to the date published. And then, just like the anthology, you'll give a page range. And this time, we have the same kind of container, right? Where before for the website, we had a name of a website. And this is specifically the name of a database. And then, again, we end with either that DOI or URL. So I have actually an article that I read recently and enjoyed, and I think might be useful for my own dissertation work, so I slipped it right in. We've got last name, comma, first name, Vernon Zachary, title in quotes, Journal of American Studies in italics. Always do VOL dot for volume. Always do NO dot for issue number. And you can see how all of these are separated with commas. And then typically, journals don't have like a specific date, like the 2nd of February. Typically, they'll either have a season, a year, or a season year or month year. So you'll see like just 2016, or you'll see fall 2016, November 2016, and you would write it straight out like that. We have our page range. Databases always go in italics. JSTOR is where I pulled this one from. And this one did have a DOI, so I've used that in place of a URL. So I want to just quickly talk about multimedia sources as a whole. I've been yapping for a while, and we're about halfway, a little over halfway done. So I'll kind of jump through these multimedia ones. I've kind of put them on the screen as references because they build off a lot of what we've done before. Like you can see with the photo, a photo is something that is in print, but this one was accessed online. It's a very popular photo. And we're following the same information. Who took this photo? What did they call it? When did they take it? And where did I find it? Again, with a song, if we jump down, we're asking the same questions. Who sang this? What's the song? What bigger album was the song a part of? Who released this song? When did they do it? And where did I find it? I found this one on Spotify with a URL. Videos are often cited like photographs or art pieces or pages on a website. So I specifically pulled YouTube videos because they're cited a little different. MLA has a specific citation for YouTube videos. And I feel like that's important because I think most of the time, me included, we get our videos on YouTube. And so with this, you always start with the title of the video. The only time you wouldn't start with the title of the video is if the person who uploaded the video is not the person who made the video. So if, like this YouTuber, Mr. Ballin, had uploaded a video that someone else had made, and they had said, like, I have uploaded this video by, like, John Doe. Then you would put, like, Doe, John, title, YouTube, uploaded by. But most of the time, you'll find that the creator and the uploader is the same individual. I just use this one as an example because I have been obsessed with this person's scary stories lately. And I just watched this, and so I was like, I'll throw it in. But we've got title, container, which is YouTube, uploaded by, and the name, it's not like their official name. Like, you don't have to look up what Mr. Ballin's birth name is. You actually put whatever their channel title is. Date, it was uploaded, and URL. And then finally for films, you're asking a lot of the same questions. What's it called? Who made this? Who are the main characters in this? Who released it and when? With films, because you're typically not focusing on like one person, and films are such a collaborative experience. I mean, there are writers, directors, performers, producers, editors, and unless you're like writing a thing specifically focusing on directors and you really want to emphasize like Jordan Peele, you're pretty much always going to start with the film title itself and then put the director and any performers that are relevant. You could skip the performer part if you feel that performers are not relevant. I went ahead and put the two main performers. Real quick, I just actually wanted to give you an image of what a sample works cited page might look like. I just pulled this off of my own. You can see Zan24 at the top. This was a works cited for one of my seminar papers I turned in last semester, and I just wanted to give you a visual of what that final product might look like. You can see I have a selection of books, journal articles, anthologies, an art piece. So it's always nice to have a very rounded works cited page. So let's go over a couple common questions about citations before we get into in-texts and formatting. Where do I find all of this info for this citation? So typically the info should be pretty easy to find. If you have a book or an anthology in your hands and you flip to like the first or second page in the book, on the right-hand side facing you, well, I guess the book is always facing you, but on that right-hand side, you'll typically see like the title, and at the very bottom, there'll often be like a logo, and then you'll see the name of some company. It usually has like a company-sounding name, and then directly under it will be one or two cities. That is your publisher, and city of publication if necessary. And if you turn that page on the back side of that same page, the left side of the book, you'll usually see your like copyright information, which will have like the year it was published. Of course, titles and author names are on the cover, and editor names are usually on the cover too, and if not, they're usually on that first page with the publishing information. On websites, you'll usually find all the information right there. Usually you have a title at the top, a like photo, and then the author name and the publication date. If there's no author name or publication date at the very top there, it probably doesn't have it. If you can't find an author name, check for an organization name first. It could have been published by an organization, and you'll typically find your website name in the top left-hand corner. But what do you do if you've looked and your source just truly has a missing piece of information? Well, if there's no author, you can just skip it. You would just start with the title. You don't have to say no author. You don't have to say unknown. You just go straight into the title. If there's no date, you also can skip it. In past versions of MLA, you would have to put ND to signify no date. But now instead, MLA recommends that you just skip it, but at the very end of your citation, you put an access date. So you let them know the date that you accessed it. And you wouldn't just replace it where the normal or the original date goes, because you don't want to confuse your audience and let them think it is the publication or writing date or creation date. You want it to be clear that you have accessed it on this date. And then if there's no publisher, you can put an NP in its place. You can see below I've made up something about smoothies. I have been craving a smoothie for like 2 days now. But I will say this is not a workshop on like research and credibility. But if you're looking for a source and it's missing like a bunch of information, like there is absolutely like there's no author, there's no date, there's no publisher, and really you can only find like maybe a title and like a URL, I would be seriously considering whether or not that source is credible. And I probably wouldn't want to stake my claims and my research on a source with so little information behind it. And then finally, the big question, right? Oh my goodness, this is so much. Can't I just plug this into a citation generator and get it done with? And yeah, you could, but I don't recommend it. And not just because I'm being like a snooty professor who doesn't want to see citation generators and wants people to do the work. I think there are two common misconceptions with citation generators. One being that they take up less time than doing it yourself, and two, that they are going to get it right, but you're going to get it wrong. And the thing is that both of these aren't actually really true. You know, when I prepared for this workshop, I asked my colleagues who teach 101 and 102 what they wanted to see me mention, and I had some repetition, but every single person said, let them know to stop using citation generators because they're often wrong, and we know when they're using it. So typically, there will be little errors. It might use an old version of MLA. It might use APA instead of MLA. It often messes up the difference between commas and periods and spacing. Often will mess up formatting and font. And in the time that it takes you to pull up a citation generator and plug everything in and click make and copy it and paste it into your document, you're spending all that time on something you might not even know was right, and yeah, you haven't learned anything, and that is important because once you start doing it a few times, I promise you it'll be quicker. You'll have much more assurance that it's right, and you'll be able to know that you did it yourself. And if you get something wrong, at least you know that you can take credit for it, and it's something you can learn, and you can't be like, oh, why didn't the generator get it right? So try not to use generators unless you're in a total pinch. Use it yourself and work with your resources. In-text citations. So once you have your end-of-text citations done, honestly, citing works in text is super easy. For MLA, you pretty much just need the author's last name and a page number. For example, my own name, you will put the author's last name in parentheses at the end of the sentence or selection of sentences you're citing. Citing. Oh, to be a human being. So I have parentheses, Zan, space 23, end of parentheses. Notice that there's no comma between name and page. You don't need that in MLA. It's just a space. Don't put any commas in your in-text citations unless you're like listing multiple citations in a row. And notice that all the punctuation is outside of the parenthetical. So the period's at the very end outside of the last parentheses. And if you had a direct quote, like let's say this line, the author's last name will go in parentheses at the end of the sentence you are citing, like so. If that was in quotes, it would say, like so, end quote, parenthesis, Zan, space, 23, parenthesis, period. So all punctuation goes outside of the parentheses. If there's no page number, you just leave the name. You only need the name. And you only use page numbers if the document gives you page numbers. If you're using a book or an online source like an article, you want it to actually have the number on the page. Don't count the pages yourself, because someone else may have different pages than you if it's like something you printed out, or if it's like your own, you converted something to a PDF but it doesn't have page numbers, you just skip that out. So if there are no page numbers given, you can just put the last name by itself. If you use the author's name in the sentence, you don't need to repeat it in the citation. According to Christina Zan, citations can be fun once you get the hang of them. You don't need to say Zan again, you've already said it. In this case, we have a page number, so we don't need to say Zan, but we still put 23. But if there's no page number and you've already said the name, you actually don't have anything in parentheses at the end. And you're not plagiarizing because you've given the name and there's no page. If there's no author, you use the title of the piece. Again, super easy. Just like how in your citation, the first thing would be the title, that's what you use in text. The only small difference is that most titles are quite long. And if your title is like over 4 or 5 words, I and MLA recommend shortening it so it doesn't take up too much space in your paper. So here I've given a sample article title I've made up, which is like 7 words long. Pay gaps cause strife among women of color. And at the end of my citation, I keep it in quotes because it's still a title, but I shortened it to pay gaps, enough that it is cohesive and clear, and you can make that connection to what article it is at the end of the paper and the works cited. This is not a plagiarism workshop, so I'm not going to go into like when all to use in-text citations and when not, but since we are talking about them, I will just quickly say, when you are directly quoting something, when you have quotes around something, always directly after that you need a citation or the author's name at the beginning of the same sentence the quote is in. Never wait to put a citation when you're using a quote. It should always be in the same sentence that the quote is in. If you're paraphrasing 1 or 2 sentences, always put it directly at the end of the paraphrase material. Not at the end of the summary if you do a paraphrase and then some summary, directly after the paraphrase itself. Now, if you're giving a summary of a source and you have several sentences, you don't have to put the citation after every sentence. You can put it at the end of whatever you're summarizing. But if you jump back and forth between summarizing like a couple of different sources, whenever you jump back to the same source again, like if you cite Christina Zan and then you summarize Jane Miller, and then you go back to Christina Zan, you would want to make that clear so that they don't think you're citing Jane Miller and not Christina Zan. Alrighty, we are actually going to hop out of PowerPoint for a second together, and I'm going to walk you through formatting a document so you can actually visually see it in Microsoft Word. I'll quickly say here are the few ground rules. Use a 12-point font, preferably Times New Roman. Double space your document and ensure there are no additional spaces between paragraphs. Ensure your document has 1-inch margins all around. Insert page numbers with your last name in the top right of the header. And start your document with your name, your professor's name, the class, and the date. I am just going to go down for a second to a document in Microsoft Word I have over here ready to go. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this to Times New Roman. My font is already in 12, so I'm good to go there. That's usually the default on most Microsoft Words and other writing softwares. Now I'm going to go ahead to the spacing. You can do this in any order you want. This is just my common order. I'm going to go ahead and select double spaced. But one more thing, if you don't go check on the space between paragraphs, you may end up with a chunk of space between your paragraphs that you don't need and could actually make your paper seem longer than it is and could mess up your page count for assignments. And it's just incorrect formatting. So on your Microsoft Word, you will probably either have something that says line spacing options, or it'll directly say 2 options here, add space between paragraphs or remove space. If you have that, click remove space. If you have line spacing options, click that. And when this window comes up, you want to find the checkbox that says don't add space between paragraphs of the same style. Boop. Okay. And now you'll notice if I type my name and I move down to the other line, there's no extra wonky spacing. While we're here, I'll just go ahead and tell you what to always put at the top of your document. Your name, your professor's name, your class. If your professor asks for a section number, you can put it directly after. And the date, which will always be day, month, year, no punctuation, and it won't be the day you're doing the assignment. Always put the date that your assignment is due here. Now let's go ahead up to our header. My favorite way to make a header is to insert the page number first and then type my name next to it. Sometimes I find if you try to put the header and then insert a page number, or insert a page number and then click insert header, they may erase each other and you may get pretty frustrated. So I like to go to insert and do my page number first, and make sure it's at the top of the page, your header, and in the right side. That's my default. And make sure the number is the same on every page. You want to see it on your first page. Now I'm not going to go back and click header up here. Instead, I'm going to double click, 1, 2, to get into my header. And I'm going to click on the 1 and use the left arrow to make sure that my cursor is right next to the 1. And I'm just going to type my last name. And now you can see that it is on the top of every page. You can also see that when you change your font on the document itself, it does not translate to the header. You have to change your header font separately. So right now our header is a totally different font from our paper. So I'm going to select that and make sure that my fonts are totally consistent. And now your document is in MLA format. I will also say you need to make sure you check your margins. The default for pretty much every document is 1-inch margins, but to double check to make sure you're not breaking MLA format, you want to go to the Layout tab and click Margins. And as you can see, the default will say 1, 1, 1, 1. If it's anything else, make sure to change it to 1, 1, 1, 1. It should be one of the pre-made options. If not, you can click Custom Margins, and then you would just type 1 into all 4 of these. You can ignore the gutter. And now you are ready to center that title, make it nice and creative, and start typing that paper. Smiley face. Gotta have a smiley face. And then I'm actually gonna scroll down here and show you how to do a works cited. Again, I've shown you how these look like. I've shown you how to do end of text, but I quickly wanna show you the formatting. So like I said, the 3 important things to keep in mind are, 1, that the spacing should be the same. Your spacing should be the same. Once you set it in your document, it'll be the same down here. Make sure that you do start the works cited on its own page. So even if your final page of your document ends at the very top, halfway down the middle, no matter how much room you have, always put the works cited on its own page. And then remember my second rule, it should always be alphabetized. And my trick, so you don't have to like go in and like actually move everything and like repaste everything, select every item in your works cited, doesn't matter how many there are, as few or as many, and somewhere on your home tab, you should have a little icon that has an A to Z on it. If you click that and make sure that it's on ascending, it'll actually alphabetize it for you. If you can't find it, don't stress. You can still arrange them in alphabetical order yourself. This is just a way to make it easier. And then finally, we need that hanging indent, where the second line and any line past the first of your citation is indented 1/2 inch. You could always try to hit tab and do this, but I find that the formatting often gets messed up because tabs aren't permanent and they can get moved around, but hanging indents make it permanent and make it sure that it's 1/2 inch and it's not going to move around unless you change the spacing. So select any of your citations, go back to those same line spacing options we discussed before, and under indentation, you should have a drop-down menu where one of the options is hanging and the default is 1/2 inch. If not, you can type 0.5. When you click OK, you've got a works cited page in perfect format. So let's finish ourselves up. Some final formatting tips. When you include a date in your paper, I talked about this a little. It is always day, month, year. Let's ignore that comma. In your header, always spell out the full month, but in your works cited pages, use the abbreviated versions of all months longer than 4 letters. So don't change like July to JUL or June to JUN. Spell spell out, spell out May, June, and July, but any other month you can abbreviate. I think pretty much every month is like the first 3 letters, but September is going to be the first 4 letters, SEPT. Again, I'm sorry, I put a comma there between month and year. That is on me. It's just day, month, year, no comma. And then I just want to do a couple moments where you don't actually cite page numbers, even if you're given them, and what to do if you have something that doesn't have page numbers because it's not a print text. So when you cite poetry, you actually cite line numbers, not page numbers. So you would count the lines on the poetry. So if this was a poem, I would count like 1, 2, 3, 4. When citing plays, you don't cite page numbers. You cite act, scene, and line with dots between them. So the way I would read this citation is Act 4, Scene 2, lines 23 to 25. And then for your visual and oral texts like films, videos, interviews, podcasts, songs, you cite timestamps. And the last thing I'll say is when you have over 4 lines of quoted material, do what's called a block quote. I have an example here. Thank you to Mecca.com for this example. And anytime you have over 4 full lines of something you're directly quoting, you put it in this little block quote where you have, see, this normal paragraph, your normal indent, writing like usual, and then you indent even further the quote, and each line is lined up with itself. And you don't need quotation marks, even though it's a direct quote, because since it's a block quote, it's understood that this is a direct quote, and the quotation marks would just be overkill. And then you continue back with your paragraph in the same line of the paragraph as normal. Again, this is a MLA workshop, so we're not talking about like, what research and like when to cite what, but I will say you should be using block quotes very sparingly. It's not often that you have over 4 lines of quoted material. You should only be including a block quote if there is absolutely no way you can paraphrase or summarize that material. It can only be said in those words, and every single line of that exact quote is necessary to understand your argument. So we're pretty much at the end of the presentation part of this workshop. And when I did this in person, I did a live workshop, but I still want to give you a chance to practice. So I have 2 sample citations for you to make. And essentially, this page has the information for it. And on the next page, I'm going to have the citation itself. And you can practice it. So what I'd like for you to do is to pause the video here and make a citation. And then after you've made your citation, play the video, and then you can see what, if all, you got right and what you need to improve upon. So this is for a page on a website, and you can rewind or go back on this recording to see what a page on a website is. You can use your everyday writer. You can use an MLA handbook. You can use the Purdue OWL website. But go ahead, take a second and pause this. I have all the information you need to make it. And go ahead and both write out how you would cite this in text and how you would do a full citation on the Works Cited page. I'm going to go ahead now and move on to the reveal. So if you have not written it down yet, go ahead and pause now because we are moving in 3, 2, 1. So this is what it would look like. We've got our last name, comma, first name, the title of the article, the place where it was published, and the URL. But because we didn't have a date that it was written and published, we do want to put that access date. And so I'm going to say we accessed it today because I'm making this on the 4th of February and accessed it for Feb 2021. And in text, because there are no page numbers, all you have to do is say Ryan in parentheses, or if you give her name in text, you wouldn't have to put anything at the end. Let's just do one more. Let's do an article found on a database. So same thing as before, go ahead and using this information. I will say with this one, you may find that some of the information is necessary and some is not. So go ahead and take the information. You have everything here you need. And again, we did one of these earlier, so you can go back if you need to. But I will go ahead and switch to the next slide, which shows the final citation of an article found on a database. So pause now if you want to do this on your own. And if not, I will be showing you how to do it, or the final results, so you can compare what you did in 3, 2, 1. Boop. So for this one, we didn't have an author. Now, to be fair, most times if you look something up on a scholarly database, they're going to have authors. But I did want to give you the chance to do a source that has a lot of information and something that is missing, so you can have a different in-text. So while this probably is not something you'll come across, it still is the correct citation for what would happen if you did come across it. So no author, so we jump straight into the title of the article. Then we have the title of the journal, volume and issue number, date published, page range, the database itself, and I gave you both a URL and a DOI, but since the DOI is what is preferred, we don't need the URL. Instead, we've used the DOI. In text, since we don't have an author, we would do a title, but again, this is kind of a long, like 8-word title, so I just used How Video Games instead of the full title, and because we have a specified given page range with specific page numbers, I have given the page number I would have found the specific quote on. So, just to go over a couple resources, make sure to use the tools that are already in your arsenal. If you're an FYE, you have an everyday writer. No matter what you are, what level you are as a student, you have a professor. There are no such thing as stupid questions. If you have a question, that means it's worth asking, and it means it's worth answering. So utilize the tools in your arsenal and practice. Now that you have some tools in your toolkit, you can start practicing how to make your best citations. Discover new tools that you may not have used before, like the MLA handbook or the MLA's own website, or my favorite online source, which is the Purdue Owl or the Owl at Purdue. They have all the details you could ever want, even more than you'd ever want on MLA, APA, Chicago, and it's easy to pull up. And then collaborate. Don't be afraid to try new things, to ask for help from friends and colleagues, specifically from here at the Writing Center. We have a selection of absolutely wonderful graduate students in English who are ready to help on your formatting and citation struggles. We're totally online this semester. This is spring 2021 that I'm talking. So right now we are totally online, and we have synchronous and asynchronous appointments. Synchronous are face-to-face, real-time virtual appointments, whereas asynchronous ones are text-based and happen where you upload a document and a tutor provides feedback and sends it back. If you have formatting issues, I recommend making an asynchronous appointment so that your tutor can look directly at your formatting questions and make direct changes and suggestions to the formatting they see. But if you want to work through and discuss citations and rules, I recommend making a synchronous appointment because it's always easier to have those conversations when both parties are there to talk. So I want to just say a big thank you for sitting with me through this presentation. I've had a lot of fun talking to my computer screen with the cats scrambling around me, but I feel like I can feel your energies through time as you are watching it on your end. It has been delightful to hopefully give you these tools. Well, I did give you them, but hopefully they connected and they did help go over some of the foundations at MLA, and they made you feel more prepared and more excited to be hands-on with this in the future. I hope to see you virtually in the Writing Center at some point in time. And I hope that you have a fantastic day when you're watching this and that your semester continues to be safe and positive and good. Thank you and goodbye.